Good morning. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the January 18, 2018 edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Today is my birthday, and so, I was thinking about, what would be appropriate to talk about today? So I did something I don't think I've ever done before, and I looked up, are birthdays ever even mentioned in the Bible? And it turns out that on two occasions there were birthday parties that were discussed. I'd always been taught that in the ancient Jewish culture, birthdays were really not a big deal, and that explained a lot of the silence in the Bible on particularities about when people were born. For example, how come the actual birth date of Jesus's birth it's kind of been lost to history to some extent. And of course, the example that was always given is the example of the Old Testament verse, in the year King Josiah died. And it's always said, see, it's not when he was born, it was when he died. And that a lot of the chronology in the ancient world was based on not the birth of somebody, but the reigning of a king. And so obviously the death of one king meant the beginning for another. But I did find, interestingly, that there are two birthday parties discussed in the Bible. Excuse me. And you know about both of them. You remember back in Genesis with Joseph, how he interpreted the dreams of the baker and the cupbearer of the Pharaoh? And then they went back to the king, and the fates that he had predicted happened. Well, they were brought back on the Pharaoh's birthday for the birthday party. And as part of the birthday celebration, one of them, as predicted by Joseph, was returned to his post and to honor and respect. And the other one was actually killed because of what was believed to be his betrayal. The other birthday party that is discussed in the Bible is actually another one you're familiar with, and that is the story of Herod, the evil King Herod, whose stepdaughter danced for him. Remember Salome? And then demanded, at the urging of her mother, to have the head of John the Baptist presented on a platter. And that was at his birthday party. So at least we have some indication that birthdays, to some extent, were celebrated in ancient times, involving some of our Jewish spiritual ancestors. But that made me also look at verses that have been suggested on the web as great verses to contemplate or to say to somebody on their birthday. And a lot of them are ones, again, that we're very familiar with, verses that we love, like from Joshua, for I know the plans that I have for you, saith the Lord. And so I believe that. I believe, what is the purpose of a birthday? What should we be thinking about on our birthdays? Well, birthdays, of course, in one way, it's just the same as any other day, but it is special and it is unique to an individual because it marks an increment, a large enough increment of time where significant things can have happened, and so it is a good opportunity for us to face ourselves in the mirror, to look at what has happened in the past, and to think about how we might want to change things for the future. But in the Joshua quote that I just said, we have to remember that it's God who has a plan, and we do the best we can to think about what would be appropriate and in God's will. But we have to hold those plans very lightly, because God will sometimes intervene and say, no, GPS needs to make a detour here. We talked about that in an earlier episode just a week or so ago. There are other wonderful verses that we need to contemplate. Like, for example, in Psalms, there's a verse that talks about that it's asking the Lord to let the psalmist know the end of his days and the extent of his life, that he may understand better that he is nothing more than a breath, that none of us are a breath. We need to understand that life is fleeting. Even the longest life is a blip on the eternity clock, and we are given a limited time. We need to make the most of every moment. I often say that when I get to heaven, what I would love to hear God say is, yes, certainly, well done, good and faithful servant. But I would also like him to just look at me and wink and say, and you didn't waste 1 second I gave you. Not 1 second. Because that is very meaningful to me. I don't want to waste 1 second that the Lord has given me. Not to say that I don't, but I don't want to. But there are other wonderful verses that I think all of us can benefit from looking at, not just on our birthdays, but any day in which we really want to think about our lives and what's happening. Other great verses are, that every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. Birthdays are a wonderful opportunity to count your blessings and to recognize the author of those blessings. But perhaps of all of the verses that were suggested as being appropriate on a birthday, there's one from Psalms that really I liked, and it said, "Teach us to number our days aright, that I might present a heart of wisdom to God." And that really hit me because, when you think about your life at any given time, I don't know how you feel about yourself. We evaluate ourselves in such strange ways. We don't really know how to evaluate ourselves. I mean, if at any given time you don't have a lot of money, you could feel like a failure. Or if you're not in a job that you love, you could feel a failure. Or if you're having relationship problems where a member of your family is struggling and you think, man, I should be able to help them more, you can feel a failure. But we need God to remind us that you never know where in the story of your life, where in the plan that God has for you, you are. And so if you try to evaluate yourself at any given point, not knowing where you are in the story, you could have a very, very wrong viewpoint of your value. For example, with Moses, from the age of 40 to 80, he's out in the back country of nowhere. He has fallen so far from where the glory of his youth of being a prince of Egypt and a commander in the Egyptian army who had gotten great fame. He must have felt like such a failure. And yet his greatest achievements, what he was being prepared for, was still ahead for him. And where are you? Where am I in the story, in the plan of our lives? We have to have God tell us how we're doing. We cannot judge that on our own because we don't know. Where are we in the story? And so I just urge all of us, whether today is your birthday or just a good day for you to sit back and think for a moment about your life, and be sure that when you're judging yourself, you do it according to God's standards. Are you being faithful to the Lord as best you understand what He's calling you to do? And then just ask Him to help you number your days aright, understanding that time is short and that it's His plan, His story that is being written. And you may not have a full understanding of what that is. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, wishing you a glorious day and asking you to join me on the next edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Bye-bye.